Thanks. Hi, everyone. Well, thank you for having me. I missed the first part of the show. Have you guys talked about Trump?
We were waiting for you, man.
Yeah.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. It's great to be here. Do you remember the first time we met?
Yeah, in my office at the White House.
In your tiny little...
windowless basement office.
Wow, this is relatable.
Bill Simmons brought you in. I remember.
And I was hosting the White House Correspondents' Dinner, and you'd written President Obama's material for that dinner, a lot of it, and...
That was Lovett screaming backstage.
He screams backstage, too?
Yeah.
And we had almost... It was funny, I'll never forget it, because you didn't want to tell me what any of the president's jokes were, and I didn't want to tell you what any of my jokes were.
We just kind of looked at each other like, yeah, it's going to be funny.
We looked at each other for a while, and I said, it'll be all right.
So you stepped into the political fray last year in May because your son Billy underwent surgery for congenital heart disorder. And I remember when you were going to speak about this, you said to me that when you want to make this argument, you don't want to be preaching to the choir. You want to try to persuade people who don't agree with you. So how did you go about doing that? And since you've been talking about it, have you had, people come up to you and say, you've changed my mind and it's been working?
No one has said that. Sadly, literally no one has said that. I get a lot of hate mail, and it doesn't mention anything like that. I will say I've spoken about a few different subjects, and when I spoke about my son, the reaction was largely positive. Mm-hmm. And in fact, most of the negative reaction that I got, at least online, seemed to be from people who were just trying to get others to click through to their articles, just taking a contrary position. And I think most people, at the very least, they said, all right, well, the guy, I don't agree with him, but his son had heart surgery, and I could see why he's upset, and he seems to care about the other people. I don't care about the other people. But he cares about the other people, and so God bless him. But and then I spoke about gun control, and then it was very, very, very different. And
those people are intense.
Yeah, that was a whole different thing. The ugliness factor ratcheted it up significantly. Mm-hmm. And then they kind of went back to the healthcare thing, and then hated me for that too. So I got retroactive hate from the healthcare thing, and I became, as I think they like to call me, a Chuck Schumer's puppet.
Okay.
Oh,
so you're
nice.
multifaceted.
Yes,
That's
sure.
great. You talk. I remember seeing you host the Oscars, and
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt, but the last time I was on this stage, Warren Beatty was standing next to me.
Wow.
He looked like he'd seen a ghost. He had 2 envelopes in his hand for no reason. And I walked to the wings, and just everyone went crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, that's good, because I was just about to ask you some questions for John Legend. So
Okay,
you staved off me making that mistake. You mentioned at the Oscars last year, reaching out and talking to people that disagree with you, and how if everybody who was watching reached out and talked to somebody who disagreed with them, that maybe we could make a difference. So fast forward to last week. You made a video where you featured a woman who was a DACA recipient, who was facing a panel of people who didn't believe in DACA. And I started watching the clip thinking this is going to be great.
That's what I thought it was going to be,
and it
too.
wasn't. It wasn't great.
By the way, it was the version that we showed on television. The real version was much, much uglier.
How is it?
Really?
How is it worse? What happened?
Well, I almost got in a fight with one of the guys.
Really?
Yeah, there were some. There was no respect being shown for this family, and they were being if you didn't see it, what happened was, and I thought this was a slam dunk, and I thought this was going to be great and really have a positive effect. And we, of course, we're all worried about DACA, and we found a young woman who was in her 20s. She came to the United States when she was a year old. Her parents brought her here. She's lived in Kansas for her whole life. She had a baby, and now she's potential subject to deportation. So she's in nursing school, just a great person. So I brought these 6 people. Actually, I will say one thing that should give us a little faith in humanity is we tried to find people just out on the street, pedestrians, and were unable to find anyone who opposed DACA. And we have a lot of tourists here in Hollywood.
Yeah,
so we're not just talking
good.
about LA. I mean, almost nobody outside this theater is from LA.
Yeah.
And so it's true. There are tourists and superheroes outside. So we found people who talked about, they're against DACA online, and we brought them in, and I thought, okay, so here's how this is going to go. We're going to sit them down. I'm going to introduce them to this woman. She's got this adorable baby who was born here in the United States. I'm going to tell her story. I'm going to explain that she potentially could get deported to Mexico. Her daughter is an American citizen. How does that work exactly? And then I was going to bring out her fiance, who is in the military and who's about to get sent overseas. Mm-hmm. And will be there for how long he doesn't know. And she could potentially be sent back to Mexico with his daughter while he's fighting for our country. And I really thought that this would have an impact on these people. And it had almost no impact whatsoever. In fact, they seemed madder. They seemed madder than if I brought somebody who'd been busted for shoplifting.
Right. My favorite moment was the woman who was like, why don't you get an immigration attorney? Like, it wouldn't have occurred to them years ago to get an immigration attorney since they were trying to deal with immigration.
And the simple argument that they tried to make is, well, why don't you guys just get married and then you can become an American citizen? Well, first of all, it's not that simple. You do have to go back to Mexico, and you could potentially be there for 10 years, according to their immigration attorney. But also, what if they didn't want to get married? What if they'd had a child together, and they planned to raise the child together, and they weren't married? I mean, his child is an American citizen. The idea that the child's mother would be sent to another country, it makes so little sense to me. I assumed it would make no sense even to these people who but they had it really did not impact.
One woman at the end I thought was
one
sort
woman
of...
at the end she was a sweet woman, and she was at least compassionate. She at least had some empathy. I'm not sure that she necessarily changed her opinion either, but
So she wasn't the one you almost got in a fight with?
She was not. She was trying to plan the wedding, is what she was doing. She tried to...
Can you describe your almost getting into a fight over this?
There was one guy in particular who kept when Michael, the military man who works here in the United States, was trying to explain his position. This guy kept interrupting him with this Sean Hannity bullshit over and over and over again. And it was upsetting him and upsetting his wife and upsetting me, and the baby was sleeping, so the baby was fine. But everybody was upset.
Yeah.
So can I ask, I mean, obviously you spoke out about healthcare because you had this family connection. Your son went through surgery. And then you went on to gun violence, and then now you've been talking about DACA. What made you embrace not just political comedy, which a lot of comedians have done in the Trump era, but like political advocacy? What's made you do that?
Well, real serious concern for the future of this country, and having children. I have 4 children. I have 2 older children in their 20s, and when I had them, I was in my 20s. I didn't necessarily think about politics in the future. I was just trying to pay the rent and make sure they had food and maybe take them to Disneyland every once in a while. But now, as I'm 50 years old, and my son went through this situation, I saw these families, and I saw a lot of low-income people being served at this hospital that relies on donations. And it seemed wrong to me that a hospital should even have to rely on donations. And I saw that even though those kids were getting great treatment at Children's Hospital here in Los Angeles, and it's a great hospital. They train doctors that go all over the country and all over the world and work in every town. But I saw that, these people, they had to take months off work. They can't get Melissa McCarthy to fill in for them that week, like
Yeah.
I was able to do. And it upset me, and I wondered how they're like making it. And for even, you think you can't work, you're upset, your whole family is upset. It's sometimes, heart disease, at least in my situation, is an operation, and hopefully it works, and then you're done with it. But there are children with cancer and, these long-term chronic diseases that they'll have to deal with for the entirety of their lives. And it just so happened that at that time, the Affordable Care Act was in jeopardy. And I don't necessarily believe that things happen for a reason. I really don't. But it sure seemed like a coincidence. And it seemed like, I just felt like, I don't know if I felt like it was a message being sent to me, but I just felt like I had to say something about those other people. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in doing so, there's kind of an old, in late night television, always the history of late night television is don't show your hand. Don't tell people what your political affiliation is. I think Jon Stewart really changed that. But when it came to network television, that really still was the case. I mean, it wasn't until late in Letterman's career that we knew what his affiliation is. Jay Leno, I think most people thought he was a Republican, and he's not. He's a Democrat, but you wouldn't know it from watching his show. And there was some wisdom to that, because when you tell a joke, if you think the person telling the joke is unbiased, you can just appreciate the joke for what it is. Mm-hmm. The underlying reason is you could potentially lose half your audience if they feel like you're not one of them. I mean, a lot of it is, do I like this guy? Mm-hmm. And, that's part of the deal. But maybe the good thing about now having 100 different channels and 30 different talk shows is you can be honest, and you can talk about these things and these things that mean something to you. And it also just so happens that pretty much every late night talk show host is a liberal.
Go figure.
And that's because it requires a measure of intelligence. Now, not a ton, not a tremendous amount of intelligence, but you do have to be over the baseline.
Sure. So I guess speaking of intelligence, one of the things that's been really fun to watch, it has been when you take people on Twitter who are much dumber than you. For example, Roy Moore. I think you and Donald Trump Jr. have gotten into it, and I think a lackey of a lackey of a lackey of Paul Ryan, or is it there a fourth lackey? Anyway, there's the multi-level lackey of Paul Ryan have gotten into it. If you could fight anybody on Twitter, who would you fight, and how would it go?
Well, it's hard to top Donald Trump Jr. because, first of all, he's Donald Trump Jr., which, what could be worse than being Donald Trump Jr.? You're not even Donald Trump. You've got that junior at the end. I would, every time if I had to choose between being Eric Trump and Donald Trump Jr., I would never, DJ TJ is not the guy that I'm going to choose. I don't think Republicans even like him. I don't know. No. His wife probably doesn't like him, let's be honest. I mean, you want an unlikable character. You want somebody that, Roy Moore was pretty great. It's like, who's on Roy Moore's side in this battle,
That was an easy
Who
one.
am I going to lose in this fight?
Right. A horse.
But I think the president would be.
The president himself.
The president
so
himself.
So how would you, what would prompt you to take on the president?
Well, I never start any of these fights. Someone else always starts them. So I would just wait for him to say something imbecilic. First, I'd probably point out the spelling errors or bad use of quotes. You see when he put Trump in quotes the other day? I get more caught up with that than the message that's like, why is Trump in quotes? He it's not easy to put quotes on your phone. It takes some doing.
Also, the capitalization and it's very bad.
It's insanity. I have an idea, and I know this would be. I know a lot of people would have a problem with this, but what if we were all required to take an IQ test? Okay. And that number had to be a part of our Twitter handle. Had to. That's it. You want to be on Twitter? There's a test. It's got to be there. And then we just kind of know where everybody's coming from.
I think it would solve a lot of problems.